are not able to attend. Typically, we have a class for Intro to Industrial Hygiene, and there's a total of 10 students. Since probably week 1, week 2, we've been operating in this dimension where I record, I assign and post on Canvas, which is our platform, and then they actually go in and they'll look at it at their leisure because, COVID and everything. So this is a bit different for everybody. Everybody's adjusting to this because usually this would be, even if it was a Zoom call, we would have, Monday, Wednesday, 11:30 to 12:30, Intro Industrial Hygiene. And I would be able to lecture and see all the smiling faces or take questions and such. But this has been a different atmosphere altogether. So this recording, we will actually post in module 15 for the students that are not able to get in, do just that. And I'm going to go ahead and put something in the chat box right quick, just in case we have anybody that does join us. Okay. So a couple of things I will say since we are recording this is that today is December 2nd. Man, it's cold out here. I was out in the field earlier and I couldn't wait to get back. My tea is all nice and cold now, but I'm still drinking it.
So tea nonetheless, huh?
Yeah. So what I shared with the class before was that we are picking up our book, which is it's a pretty decent book. But some of the things that I found that I wanted to go into further detail about was process safety. I think I dealt with process safety and didn't know what it was early in my career. I worked for North Carolina OSHA as a clerk, and this was in 1993. And 1992 was when the standard actually, went into action. And I had people who were, remember Dr. Ed Getty. He was this guy who was dealing with a lot of questions coming from industry on process safety. And I just remember, he was always frustrated. He was always busy, always on a call, sending out emails. And, I had no idea that, in 2001, 2002, when I got down to Georgia, I would be slowly integrated into process safety, specifically with Georgia Power and hydrogen ammonium and chlorine. And then coming over and meeting you, Chris, over at Georgia Pacific and dealing with it in a different element because it wasn't a covered process that I dealt with. You obviously worked on the chemical division side, but dealing with it from combustible dust and explosions and having the CEO at the time actually say, process safety was a priority for the company, given the history that they had at Georgia Pacific. So, it leads us up to what I think is very important for our students to understand, and that's how process safety has morphed to where it is now, but also where it should be going in the future, because these are the students that will become safety managers, engineers, industrial hygienists, and they'll be needing to know some fundamentals that obviously was not covered in the book, but I wanted to bring that forth with them. So let me see if I can get back out of this thing. Nope. All right. So what do you guys see right now?
I'm seeing myself now. I don't see your screen anymore. Well, I don't see you anymore.
You don't see me anymore? Okay.
Well, now I do your speaking, but I'm not seeing a screen that you're sharing if you're sharing.
There we go. All right, how about now? Can you see me now?
I can see you, but I still don't see your screen. I don't know if Clint can, but I can't see anything that you may be sharing.
All right, so I'm not sharing anything just yet. So that's what's led us up to this. I had to get back to the screen. All right, so Chris, you're an important person. I'm gonna let you do your thing. We can either have you take control of it, or I can actually bring up your PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, you can go ahead and bring it up. I know that's what we talked about, and we'll go through the talks today. And so hopefully, if I understood you correctly, I think you were going to provide the students that will be watching today with an overview on process safety and OSHA, and so they should already have that in their pocket, right? I guess.
Yes, what I did was I put a posting on Monday, and I recorded it, but it was a Pennsylvania's process safety stuff, and I think it was 85 slides. So I recorded it, and I'm hoping that they were able to see it, because I don't know how long I talked, but man, 85 slides. It was pretty.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least they have the background, and I just say that because my talk today is not going to be, deep in the OSHA and the elements. It's more about, giving the students an exposure to my career, some of the things that I've dealt with, some of the roles I've held, how they tie into process safety, and then give a little bit about my company, right, who I work for now, and what we do, just a small piece of that, and then really talk about what it means to envision with purpose and with the process safety lens. So I think all those elements are going to be important to kind of weave together. And then depending on who's on today, we can save time for questions at the end too. So a question about me, career, or my company, or process safety, and I'm fully open to be able to do that. Okay. So the floor is mine.
Say one more time.
You said the floor is mine now?
Oh yeah, man, take it. Do you think?
Okay. Well, good deal. Now, so John, first off, thanks for the opportunity, man. It's always excited when I can get in front of the future leaders in industry and talking to students, and this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. So thank you for this opportunity, and to the students, thank you for your time. But of course, I'm Christopher Headen. I've been working in industry, I guess, about 18 years now. As you can see on the slide, my background is in chemical engineering. I also have a executive master's in business, a certified process safety professional, functional safety engineer as well, as long as some other things there too. I didn't necessarily list. But right now, I currently work for Cargill, and I have a dual role. I'm the global EHS director for combustible dust related facilities, but also just recently took on the role as process safety director for North America. So responsible for building the process safety organization, a new one in Cargill in North America. So I'm staying pretty busy there. I'm home based in North Carolina. That's where I'm originally from. And as you can see on the left, I've held a number of roles throughout my career. I actually started my career with Archer Daniels Midland out in the Midwest in Nebraska, working at, it's a food company. Starting in process and project engineering type work. Also some supervision work there while I was there for a number of years. I also worked for a Dutch-based company called DSM that's based out of the Netherlands. Also some engineering work there, some site leadership type roles there, technical manager, technology manager there. And then as John mentioned, where he and I met was at Georgia Pacific, my stint there. And also worked in some safety and process safety roles there, but also site leadership type roles. The interesting thing to note though in my career path, so I said my background's in chemical engineering, but I've also held some supervisor and plant manager type roles and engineering roles. Each and every one of those roles had a direct tie and link to process safety, right? And my success in those roles, whether it be a site leader or an engineer or a technology manager, was directly correlated to my success to be able to manage process safety in the right way, right? So if I'm a plant leader, right, I can't blow up my facilities and I can't supply my customers, and I need to make sure my operators can go home safely. I have to protect the environment, right? So there's a direct tie to process safety there. Same thing with engineering, right? If I'm designing a new plan or a process, right, I have to take into consideration process safety, having the right safeguards in place, right? Good engineering design, the right materials of construction. So there's a thread that weaves throughout all of those, and we don't necessarily think about that. We think about, hey, if I'm a safety manager, it's process safety. But mainly, if you're in operations, what you do can directly impact process safety and vice versa, right? And so I just wanted to note that. If you look down below, it's a picture of me and my family, my wife and my two girls and my son. And we like to travel quite a bit. You can see those pictures there. And that's another thing that's nice about process safety and engineering, right? It affords you to be able to travel the world and do some of the things that you're passionate about. Down on the bottom, you'll see some bikes. I like biking, road biking and trail biking. I also do some kayaking and like going to the mountains and those things. And just a little personal note about me. When I describe myself, I say I'm creative and passionate and driven. So although I do have an engineering background, also master's in business, pretty creative too. So I like to write poetry and play instruments and that kind of stuff too. So I try to stay well-rounded in that regard. I thought I'd just share that, just a little bit about me and tie my career experience into process safety. So I don't know if I can I go to the next slide? Let me see if I can. No, I can't. Yeah, you can go to the next slide.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. So this is just a little bit about Cargill, and I like to start with the purpose. So Cargill is a pretty big company. We're one of the largest privately held companies in the world. Coke Industries, who I used to work for, and Cargill go back and forth every 2 or 3 years. I think Coke they've overtaken us as number one now. But our purpose is to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. I think right now we have about 170,000 employees. We operate in about 75 countries and about 154 years of industry experience. And we like to call ourselves a trusted partner in food, agriculture, finance, and industrial, right? So we have an agriculture division where we do a lot of, deal with the grain and wheat and a lot of those type products. We make food ingredients like syrups in our starch and sweetness business. Animal nutrition and protein is one of our biggest parts of our business. So we have a lot of protein facilities of beef and cattle, turkey and poultry, eggs facilities throughout the US and globally. And then we dab in financial and industrial as well. So we do some trading with raw grains as Cargill, but we also have a few chemical type companies, industrial companies, and there's 2 in the US actually that make the bulk of the waxes so if you go to Bath and Body Works and get your candles, Cargill is the one that makes those, the wax, the base wax that goes into those candles. So pretty big company, pretty diverse. Fiscal year 2019, our adjusted operating earnings were about $2.82 billion. I think last year we were closer to $3.2 billion. So, we're creeping and climbing up there. And we have new mergers and acquisitions each and every day in Cargill. So it's a pretty big company. So that's us at a glance. You can go to the next slide then. So with that, so I gave you a little bit about my background, a little bit about chemical engineering and process safety and how it's woven into my experience. But I want to talk a little bit about envisioning with purpose and what does that mean? And hopefully you get something out of this that helps you in your career, but with a process safety lens. So you can go to the next one. Yeah, so to envision, if you think about the word envision, it literally means to picture oneself or to visualize or to be able to imagine a future possibility for someone or something, right? If we think about the word purpose, it's the reason for which something is done or created or why something exists, right? And it's important to know here that purpose it's personal, but it's not at all selfish. Right? Identifying why you're created, why you exist, and why you're living in your purpose, right? And most people are living without fully understanding their purpose. And we don't have a lot of these conversations, especially in this technical setting, but I think they're all kind of intertwined, if you don't know your purpose, I'll give you a kind of a starting point. It's really, where you're driven, your internal desires, that thing that you get excited about. And it could be industrial hygiene, it could be process safety, but it's important to identify those early on in your career journey because you want to make sure that you're closely connected to that as you make your career decisions. You can go to the next one. So it's really about how do you see yourself, right? So to envision with purpose is about seeing yourself through the lens of your internal desires and making decisions throughout your career that position you to make sure you stay forever linked to those. And it's easy to get caught up in the routine, right? The work that you do, the schoolwork, if you're in internships or you're working part-time as you go through school, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, but you need to make sure you keep a connection to those things that are internally satisfying and link those to your career decisions and also your school decisions, right? You can go to the next one. So I laugh at this picture. And I think I gave this talk about a year or so ago to 2,000 interns at Cargill, and most people didn't know who this person was. It's Indiana Jones, if you don't know, but when I was growing up, he was one of my heroes, actually. When I was a young boy, I knew with everything that was in me that I wanted to be an archaeologist, right? I wanted to be like Dr. Henry Jones. And it was based on some things that were driving me internally, right? I would often dream and daydream about, waking up in Egypt and Cairo, eating breakfast and coffee, getting ready for my day and exploring. And that dream for me lasted well into my middle school years. But if I look foundationally, why did I want to be like him? I was a lover of languages. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to explore. I wanted to help people. I had a love for science and engineering, and a lot of the things he did were directly tied to that. So that was pulling at me even at that early age. You can go to the next one. So even at that tender age, for me, I knew what it was, even if I didn't know what the words meant. I knew what it was to look at the world through the lens of my innermost desires. And even I knew what it was before I knew what it meant to envision with purpose, right? And you probably have some similar childhood stories that you can tap into that kind of drive your most inner desires and what you want to do and what you want to be as a person. So I'm not saying, stop what you're doing in your career now and rethink it. I'm just saying, just your perspective wise, look through the lens of those things that were driving you in your youth. And are you still connecting to those in your career choice and the choices you're making in school? We can go to the next. So if you fast forward in adulthood, for most of us, our lives are vastly different than the way we envision them in our youth. Influences come from every side. As I said earlier, you get bogged down in the day-to-day, and you can find yourselves in a career path or going down a path that wasn't necessarily designed for you. You can go to the next one. So remember, to envision is to see yourself, and more importantly, through the lens of your internal desires and not through the desires of other people. You go to the next one. So envision with purpose in my career. The next one. So I like this quote here from Roy Disney, and I'm tying it back into process safety here in a slide or two. But I love what it says here. It says, it's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are, and that's absolutely true. For me, envisioning with purpose in your career means establishing your goals, making career choices and decisions with a clear understanding of who you are and why you are. And to do this, you must understand who you are at your core and what you value and what your passions are. And in this next slide, I just listed here for you to take a look at. And this is just my base 10. I'm not saying you have to have 10 core values, right? But these are the 10 that I live by, that I use as a guide when I'm setting career goals, or even when I was in school and college and making these decisions on which internships I would take, or which co-op I would take, or which field I was going to do. I would gauge myself based on these, right? I told you about my childhood story with I had a passion for languages and travel and flexibility and science and engineering. Making those career decisions, I based them off of these my base 10, my core values, and do they line up with the things that I believe in? And so that's extremely important to me. And so for me, even within Cargill, when I can look 18 some odd years later, I'm able to envision myself with purpose with the work I do with Cargill, something that fulfills me and that's linked to my core values. You go to the next one. So with this, how I envision with purpose with Cargill, it ties into process safety directly. And hopefully you got out of the slides, the 80 some odd slides that John gave you, that process safety at its core is really, there's a lot of literature out there, right? But at its core, process safety is a disciplined framework, right? It's just a management system. And it's a management system that we use to ensure that we have integrity of our operating systems, right? And that we have the ability to mitigate process hazards, utilizing good engineering design principles, good engineering, good operating practices. And really at the core is process safety is how we keep our people safe, right? It's how we keep our people safe, our processes safe, and how we keep the environment safe. We save lives and we prevent the catastrophic events when we apply those process safety principles. You can go to the next one. So this is a picture, and it's always near and dear to me when I look at this. This is a picture of the Imperial Sugar explosion. I think it was back in 2008, February 7th, if I remember correctly, where 14 people were killed in a process safety incident. In one incident, 14 lives were lost. I think 38 other people were severely injured. I think 14 of those 38 were hospitalized with severe burns, and they were in there for weeks, if not months. And this explosion was a result of fugitive dust, sugar dust that was in the packaging area. And then you can see the devastation. You can go back to that one, the previous slide. And so when I look at a picture like this, it brings it all home to me why it's so important, for me to manage process safety in the right way, and how the work that I do each and every day allows me to be that person that can allow my people to go home safely each and every day. To allow us to supply our customers, right? To be that operating company that's #1 in the world and, $3 billion in operating earnings, right? And so that's the work that I do within Cargill. Let's see the next one. So in process safety, in the materials that John gave you, they probably talked about OSHA and the 14 elements and regulatory. If you look at other agencies like AICHE or CCPS, they talk about the 20 elements of process safety. But in Cargill, we try to keep it as simple as possible because we want to translate this message down to our operators and throughout the organization. So rather than talk about 14 elements and regulatory, we break it down into these 4 pillars of process safety. And all of those 14 elements or 20 elements roll into these. But to keep it simple, when we talk about process safety, it's really about understanding the process risk. How do we help our sites and our business leaders and our sales folks? How do we help them understand what process risks are out there? That's first and foremost. But then also how we're managing those risks. How do we help our sites manage the risk, right? There are many ways we can manage risk, putting the right safeguards in place, having the right procedures, having the right training, having qualified operators, right? Having good designs, good engineering designs. How do we manage the risks that are out there? And thirdly, how do we learn and improve, right? How do we not only learn and improve from our mistakes, but from our successes? How do we share that across the different facilities so that we're doing it the same way, so that we're managing these risks in an adequate way so we don't have those explosions like we saw in the previous slide? And then the last one is, as leaders, how do we commit to having what we call in Cargill zero harm? So no harm coming from our processes to our people or our environment. So when we think about process safety, we try to roll it into these four pillars. And these 4 areas, they translate the time spent at the facility, right? Either at our plants or directly with our facilities and our personnel to make sure we're managing the safety of our processes the right way. I think you can go to the next one. So it's how we achieve zero harm in Cargill. And by focusing on process safety, by doing the work that I do as the North America Process Safety Director, and even EHS, the Global Director for when it comes to combustible dust processes, we eliminate the incidents and drive out risk within Cargill. And that's for all of our businesses and enterprises, focusing on process safety. So that's what it means for me. You can go to the next slide. But then bringing it back to you, again, it's really about how do you see yourself, whether you pursue a career in process safety or it's industrial hygiene or engineering, how do you see yourself? You can go to the next slide. So just remembering to envision is to see yourself, most importantly, to see yourself through the lens of your internal desires and not the desires of others. So taking a look in the mirror, seeing yourself in a lens that's directly connected to your internal desires, knowing who you are, developing and understanding and internalizing those core values that are going to drive you throughout your career, establishing those goals with a newfound understanding of your path, right? And how you add value. The work that you do should mean something. And then taking that first step to your purpose-driven future. And I do that in process safety in every role that I have. But I challenge you as students to envision with purpose. But I think that's the last slide that I have. So I'll be happy to open it up for questions. I thought I saw at least one pop up in the chat, maybe.
Yeah, Clint had a question. Let's go back. Let's see, how do I get? Not that way.
If I can see, let me see if I can.
Okay.
Popped up for me too.
All right. So I'm looking at the chat, and Clint's question is: do you prefer the food industry over others?
Do I prefer the food industry over others? That's a pretty big question. I'd say not necessarily. I mean, I do. Every industry that I've worked in, I've learned something. There's a tremendous learning opportunity in whichever path you go. I do like the food industry. I started there, and ultimately I ended up back here with Cargill. It's a nice space for me. I wouldn't say I necessarily prefer it. For me, if I look back to what I just gave in my presentation, what's important to me is not necessarily the industry, but I make career decisions when it comes to where I'm going to go based on my core values, right? So when I was working for Georgia Pacific and I was doing well, I had a few promotions, and then Cargill gave me a call. I first turned it down, but then they called me and talked to some more things. But then I did some digging and I looked at, what are the values and the guiding principles for Cargill and how do they match up with my own? And so I make those decisions based on that, right? Does the company core values, do they match up with mine? I try to talk to people that are inside the company. I look at the articles and the reviews on the company to see, is it going to be a nice fit for me personally, internally? And then I know I can thrive in the organization. So whether it be food or chemical, I've worked in wood and, all over. If that company doesn't match up with my core values, then it's not going to be a good fit for me.
That's interesting. I think that a point you raised there, and I like the way you eloquently put a lot of what your hard work has gotten you to at this point. And I think you should really emphasize the hard work piece. You know, I have
Yeah.
faith and you have faith, but the hard work that you used when you came into it's, and think about it as a recent graduate. You're coming into the field, you know, what does that look like for you? You're coming in and you got all these things you want to do. 18 years later, you've done them, but what did it take to get there?
Yeah, you know, that's an excellent point, man. And it does take a lot of hard work, and it's tough. You know, I do quite a bit of mentoring with kids and even high school and middle school and even college students. And one thing I try to emphasize is exactly what you just said, that it's going to take hard work, you know. And our generation today, and my son included, you know, we want our stuff now, right? We want to get out of school and we want to make, you know, 200,000, and we want to be able to have all the decision rights and everything. But it takes hard work, right? And so coming right out of school, I mean, it was tough work. You know, if I look back to my role at Archer Daniels Midland, I was a fresh guy out of school. I came in, I had this engineering degree, and I think I know a little bit, and I had to do shift work. I'm working as a shift supervisor, working through rotations, you know, and sometimes I'm working third shift, right? And I'm getting dirty. I'm out there working with the operators. I'm driving skid loaders, and, you know, that's not necessarily what you would imagine as an engineer, right? But you have to put that hard work in as you build up in your career, and that's anywhere you go, right? I mean, there's hard work, you know, putting in the effort, but it's easy to do when you're in a company that matches up with you personally and your values, right? And something you can believe in, and the work that you're doing is meaningful. It's easier to put in that hard work, but without a doubt, you're absolutely correct that, you know, you have to put in the hard work, and it takes a lot of hard work and determination and persistence, you know, to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, to your point, you got to ask a lot of questions. You got to get your hands dirty. You get that street cred. Let's talk a little bit about process safety, because you've seen it in so many different ways. And, you know, this is kind of to piggyback off of what Clint was asking. And let's just go over to what you may have seen when you were at Georgia Pacific, because they had a lot of stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm correct, how many facilities did you actually manage when you were there?
I don't even remember, 20 some facilities. Well, that was in the U.S. and in Latin America.
So you had a lot of facilities, right?
Oh yeah,
a lot of facilities. What were some of the challenges, I guess, that you had in managing so many facilities for process safety? And how did you do it? Like, what are some of the methods that you used to get everybody? That's a lot of facilities. I only had 6.
Yeah, well now, yeah, there's thousands now. In Cargo, we have like 1,600 facilities globally, so it is tough. But getting back to your example in Georgia Pacific, because I think it's a good one. Of course, there are many challenges, right? When you have that many facilities, you know, understanding where you are, right? Understanding how people manage process safety at the different facilities. You'll have different what we call maturities in process safety. Some facilities may embrace it even more. Some might not know. Some facilities may have newer operators, right? Some have some operators that have been there 20 or 30 years, so they know the process, they know safety. Some other challenges is, you know, I had facilities in North America and South America, right? So language barriers and culture barriers. And so there's a ton to deal with when you're managing that many facilities. But to your point earlier, you know, you can't do everything at once, right? So you just got to be able to dig in and learn and grow and ask questions. And so, you know, one of the first things I did coming into Georgia Pacific was, you know, I worked at one of the facilities. So I got to know the technology and the processes and the people, and dug into the ground to see what was really going on, right? Because it's hard to do that if you're just sitting at a high level. So you know, no matter what you're going to do, whether I said it's industrial hygiene or safety or engineering or what have you, you got to be comfortable getting down to a certain level of detail. You know, no matter how high you get in the organization, you can't be afraid to get your hands dirty, to really understand what's going on, to be able to make good decisions and how you move forward, right? And so it's that balance between digging deep enough and not getting too deep, and being able to come back up to see the global picture and how you're going to move an organization. And it takes some practice to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so being able to go between those two, understand what's going on at the floor, and listen to a guided coalition of people that can help you, because you can't do it alone, right? 20 some facilities, one guy can't do it. So building a coalition, understanding what's going on, being strategic enough to step back up and really put a plan together and guide that, and being able to communicate up and down the chain in the organization. So, you know, when you get to a certain level in the organization, you have to be as comfortable talking to a CEO as you are with a plant operator, right? And being able to go back and forth. And so, you know, a lot of that helps, right? But it takes practice and to be able to do that.
Communication skills, and that's really important. That's verbal and written.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And that's a very good message. I've been talking to the students throughout the semester about that, communication skills and something else you just summarize that, project management skills.
Oh yeah.
You got a project over here, say it's in North America, say it's up in Canada, something like that, and you got to boots on the ground is the way we used to talk about it. You got to go out there, you got to see what's happening. So that's amazing. Give us one of those things where maybe it was a close call. Maybe you went out and you saw something, kind of guide us through that, a situation, a scenario. But you went out there, you saw something, and you had to take immediate action. What it was that you did. Tell us a story. Tell us a story.
Yeah, man, I have so many of those, man. It's and fortunately, and some people may say unfortunately, I seek out those opportunities because those opportunities can really shift an organization and have a step change there. But there've been so many instances where, if as I mentioned earlier, if you don't dig into the details and get out on the floor and really see what's happening, you won't have those cases. But I can tell you there's countless amount of times where I'm getting to know a facility or I'm getting to know a business. And, just like with Cargill when I came in, one of the first things I did, they brought me in partly because of my combustible dust related experience. And we wanted to build some programs and tools and training around dust. We wanted to line across Cargill. So we went out and did that. But even before I picked up a pen or started typing off my computer about building a standard or a training, I told my boss, I said, hey, when I first came in, he said, hey, how fast do you think you can, and I'm talking to the VP, said, how fast do you think you can get these standards and things done? And I said, well, I need to travel the world and get to the facilities first. I literally spent my first 6 months getting to know the business. I tagged along with some of the manufacturing technology leaders, and I went to Canada, I went to South America, I went to Asia, I went all over just to see the facilities, right? And to talk with the people and talk with the operators, see what they're struggling with. What kind of assets are we dealing with? How do we look at risk? How do we manage risk? And that's where you have those conversations, like you said, right? And there could be cases where you go out and say, man, there's dust everywhere. I'm like, okay, let's have a timeout. Let's sit down and talk about what the risk is here and how do we move forward. And those can be pivotal moments, right? You're walking around and maybe the site doesn't know. They don't know the risk. And so you sit down and you show the imperial sugar picture, or you show the video and talk about combustible dust, and people are, oh man, and they're pulling for more. And so, and I've done it in every step of my career, and I can give examples in, whether it be ADM or DSM or even Georgia Pacific, of course. And even now, with me being in Cargill, I seek out those moments because those are really teachable moments, right? Not just sitting at your desk telling people what to do, right? But it's out in the field helping people get better. Because identifying the issue is one thing, but if you can come up with creative solutions to help the site be better, now that's what true leadership is. And I live for those moments.
No, very good. And I love the way you're so smooth, man. You stick to the code, which is confidentiality in some of these situations.
Hell yeah.
I love that. Well, the position that you sit in now, first give us a description of kind of what you do, what your day-to-day looks like. And this is you having all this experience, boots on the ground, really invested, 6 months touring the world. That's awesome, man. Without a band. Ed, what you're doing now, and then also what I want you to do for the students to have a benefit of this is, what would you look for in someone coming out of school that's a safety engineer, that's a process safety engineer, or that's an industrial hygienist? What would you look for that person? What do they need to bring to the table when they get their first job or internship? So kind of what you do now and then, what you're looking for.
That's a great question. So for me, and I focus, because I do have a global role still with combustible dust, but I focus on this North American piece. And so right now I'm responsible for process safety for all of North America. And in Cargill right now, we're going through what we call an EHS transformation. So I told you Cargill is about 154 years old. So if you think up for about 150 of those years, we've operated as kind of a holding company. And so you saw the first slide out, or the second slide, where it had all of our different divisions, and we're pretty diversified. So what that means is we operate as a holding company. We were so diverse that at a corporate level, we just said, hey, your industry, abide by the guidelines and the rules. Don't kill anybody, right? High level, just manage it the way you need to manage it. And that's but right now, over the past 4 or 5 years, we said, well, we want to be an integrated operating company. And what does that mean? So that means we're closer to the businesses. We're more aligned in how we manage risk and talk about risk and understand risk, and across the different businesses. So whether you're a beef processing facility, or you're making candle wax for Bath and Body Works, We want to make sure that we're managing and understanding and talking the same language when it comes to risk. So we're positioning ourselves and putting people in place in North America to be able to do that. So I'm building a team of process safety specialists in North America and process safety leaders to help us do that across the different businesses. And it's challenging, right? So you have to be able to understand what's going on in the protein plant and ammonia refrigeration systems, a poultry plant, right? Or a starch and sweetness facility, or a grain elevator, right? Or animal nutrition and health site. You may be a sub-regional lead for the West Coast, so you have all of those facilities under your purview. So part of what I do is, I'm building this team right now. I'm hiring folks right now to put them in a position to be able to partner with our businesses to understand the risk, understand the technology, and help them make risk-based decisions, and help us to be consistent in how we manage process safety in our region. So that's a pretty big ask, right? So aligning on how we manage process safety in all of those businesses. So that's my role, right? Building this team, putting people in a position to lead process safety, helping them partner with operations leaders and engineering and safety folks to help manage that risk. So it's a nice opportunity. It's actually a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like, you never see a company this big transforming that much. So I'm thankful for that, to be able to build this team from scratch. And we're kind of building the runway as we're, the plane is going down, as some people say. So that's my role. Your second question is, what am I looking for? What do I look for? And it goes back to what I said, my first, when you talk about my career and what I did in ADM, is I'm looking for people with operations experience, people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty, people who ask questions, who are inquisitive, who are problem solvers, right? And so when I'm filling my organization in process safety, people say, oh, well, you want the person that has all these flying colors in EHS. No, not really. Most of the people that I'm looking for that's paid their dues and have been in operations and have been supervisory type work and knows the plant. Because for me, the more operations experience you have, the better safety professional you can be, right? So now you're not operating on theory. You know what it means to be 3 o'clock in the morning and there's a valve frozen, it's 40 feet in the air, and you got to get people up there. So you know a little bit about proper design, right? You know what it takes. And so that's what I'm looking for. People that have kind of well-rounded, people that have operations experience, that aren't afraid to get their hands dirty, and that are solution oriented.
That's great. I appreciate that. Sounds like you have, sounds like every day is different for you.
Oh yeah.
Sounds like your people skills have to be part of your superpower, dealing with people, whether it's, someone has a personal issue or someone needs some professional development, a team is really complex. And I think that, understanding yourself really as a leader is probably one of those founding principles on how you can actually lead different people. So leadership wise, what are the things that you use to develop your leadership skills?
Oh man, that's a good question. What are the things I use to develop my leadership skills?
Yes.
Yeah, so actually it's funny. I just gave a talk to our executive leadership team today on, there was a diversity inclusion moment, and we talked about what inclusive leadership means. And there's 6 core principles around what it means to be an inclusive leader. But part of that is being curious about others, being aware of biases, cultural intelligence, spending time to understand the people that work for you and with you, to help you be a better leader, right? Because one of the mistakes I made early in my career, when I was first a supervisor at ADM, I was right out of college. I guess you see on TV or you hear people talk about this command and control, and I'm the guy. And I made a mistake back early in my career that thinking that you can manage people one way. And I quickly learned that that's not the case, right? And so you asked, what are some of the things I do? One thing I do is what's called reflective leadership. So I try to every day and every week, I look back at my actions and how, I manage my team, I work on my team, my interactions, and I see how, those things line up with what my core values are. And I kind of try to get better, right? So what am I doing as a leader? How do I stay to my core values, and how I manage my team? The other piece is being an inclusive leader, understanding people, understanding what makes them tick, knowing that your team is going to be different, and you have to manage people in different ways. So taking the time to understand what makes them tick, what drives them, what are their fears, what are their aspirations. And the more you understand that, the easier it is to manage a multifaceted team, right? Because my team was all over the world, all over the US. They come from different walks of life, different backgrounds. And so spending that time to really understand who they are and what drives them helps you get the maximum value out of the people that work for you. And so I spend a lot of time there, understanding people and putting them in the positions where they can grow and be better, and, at what it is they do.
No, well stated. I think that's something that comes from, experience and learning. And, I'm sure as great as a mentor you are, that you've been mentored by some folks that
Oh yeah.
and diverse backgrounds and giving you some great insight. And I'm sure that you've asked questions because you're also inquisitive, so it kind of goes both ways. You're asking questions here at this level, but when you get to this level, you still have to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Communication is a driver of making culture changes, which in EHS, we're all focused on doing that for health, wellness, and safety, and also the public with coronavirus. Clint, do you have another question for Chris? I know we're looking at about 10 minutes now. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I was just going to ask how you just mentioned that the COVID was affecting you as far as your travel through the other countries to your sites, along with your sites here in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
and how are you having to deal with that differently per country and site?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult. Well, one nice thing about Cargill is because, I like to say we had a leg up on it, and some of the things we're doing inside of Cargill is probably world-class in my view, and how we managed that whole pandemic on the front end. Because we're a global company, we had a line of sight to what was going on in China. We had a lot of operations there. And so based on what we were seeing there and, around Wuhan and all of that, we took quick action. We put together a task team and put together a playbook on how do we manage COVID in the United States, which allowed us to get to put these practices in place in our protein facilities, where those are some of the largest facilities we have for Cargill. So there's thousands of people there in our protein processing facilities. So we put in these barriers and screening and temperature monitoring and all that. We were doing that months ahead of a lot of other folks, which helped us a lot. But just talking about how it impacts me directly and my team is that it's really tough. Process safety and EHS, I talk about it's important to be on the floor to see what's going on. And now that's limited. And so we're having to be creative in how we do those things, right? How do we keep up on our regulatory requirements and doing PRAs and audits and those kind of things? And so we're moving more virtual, right? We're using technology. We're using wearable technology to do field tours before PRAs and those kind of things, just as an example. We have a task team that's working on virtual audit. What does that look like? How can you use a business solutions type approach to review documentation even before? So a lot of the stuff you would do with sitting in a classroom or conference room reviewing documentation, doing that ahead of time. And then using the wearables to do audits out in the field, using somebody that's local to the site. So it's been challenging. Some of the things take longer, of course. Building stakeholder relationships and staying connected to the sites are tough. It's tougher. We have to be more intentional about that. So I spend a lot of time with my team on, how do we creatively keep those connections, and we've been doing okay so far, and we'll have to continue to manage that, and hopefully we get to the other end of it, so I can get back out and start traveling again, because that's one thing I miss.
Yeah, virtual EHS has been a challenge for a lot of us, and I was even talking to a group a couple of weekends ago about virtual internships. So I don't know if your company's considering that. As big as you guys are, maybe that's another thing we can talk about as a side conversation.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to be on another call tomorrow about virtual internships. So great question, Clint. I think obviously we're dealing with this, at school, and it's being dealt with around the world. Any other questions that you may have? What you think your classmates may want to hear, just because it's being recorded, so they'll listen to it. But anything that you think that, based off of the PowerPoint presentation that I narrated, 85 slides for process safety.
82, I gave you some 85 on me.
Yeah, and then the fact that Chris has given us a great overview, which is dealt more with the dynamic side of it. I think that what he's shown is, the personal value that you have to have in your career, but also being blessed to have an alignment with the job and career that he does in his passions and the fuel that he has used over the years to get him to where he is now. But is there anything else that we may have been missing because we haven't been in school in a while? I mean, well, you're probably always in school doing something, getting another degree. Well, I haven't been in school. Clint, anything that you can think of that, the millennial generation may want to know? Kind of close us out here.
Not this time.
Okay. So overall, was everything kind of answered in this presentation? Because, again, I want you guys to get connected to people who actually do what it is that you probably aspire to do. At some point in time, this is where we'll retire and you guys will take over the mantle. So is there anything that you felt I had a question about in prepping you for that?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, that's great. So I think we're at a point that we can probably conclude this presentation. I want to thank Chris, again, for taking time out your busy schedule for delivering this presentation, which we'll be posting for the students. So you may get an email, or I may have a question for you later on that someone asked, just because I really think that there's so much to cover. Process safety alone is one thing, but looking at a career in this crazy industry, we could talk about robotics, we could talk about changing cultures, all things that you've seen and done. So there may be some other conversations that we can have later on. So if that's the opportunity, we want to invite you back to, lead in that discussion, based off of what you had in your career. But that's my part. Any final words that you want to say before we sign off?
No, I just say thanks again for the opportunity. And to your point, I welcome that. What I typically say to all the students that I speak to, and this is a real open invitation, it's not only for you to be introduced to me and me to talk you through concepts, not only in process safety, but career choices and all of those things, because I think they go hand in hand. I think we talk too much just about the technical when they really weave back and forth. But you can use me as a resource now. So now Christopher Headen, he works for Cargill. He's a chemical engineer. He's in safety and process safety. So feel free to reach out if you have a question or comment. Maybe John, you can share my Cargill email. I am a resource, right? If you want to bounce ideas off of, whether it be about school or Cargill or process safety or what have you, feel free to reach out. And every time I do, I have one or two students that do, and I appreciate that, because I wish I had that when I was coming through school, right? Somebody that gave me a different perspective on how to think about things. And so now you can use me at your disposal. And to your other point, I'll be happy to come back and continue discussions about whatever it is you want to use me for. But again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Clint, have a great afternoon. I think that is all that I have. So again, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Clint. And we'll look to continue these conversations. And you've actually inspired me to go do something today. So I appreciate that.
All right, good deal. Take care.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good one, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.